in the book of Ruth, some characters we see from their own point of view. Other characters we see from the outside. We see Ruth and Naomi in their own point of view about their experiences. We watch them responding to it, reacting to it. So we're more inside their heads and their emotions. Boaz, we've been viewing from the outside. We view Boaz from the point of view of Ruth and Naomi, and we don't get his thoughts. We only see what he does and what he says. There's another character in the book of Ruth, and that is the Lord. The Lord is always the main character in every Bible story. But in this case, the main character doesn't say anything, doesn't appear to do anything. We're looking at the Lord himself from Naomi's and Ruth's perspective. We're seeing him from the outside, and it almost would appear that he's not doing anything until you look closer. When you look closer, you realize that the Lord has a plan, and that Ruth's experience and Naomi's experience is really an important hinge on the plan of God swinging open and opening his salvation to the world. I've asked you to open to Genesis chapter 12. There's a very important promise here. We're going to actually spend a lot of time on this promise after Holy Week in April. We're going to look at the impact that this one promise has on all the rest of Scripture. But just for this morning, I want to remind you of what it says. Here is Abraham in this picture by Lorenzo Monaco, and he is holding the knife with which he just killed the sacrifice that saved the life of Isaac, his son, who's kneeling there before him. A wonderful image of Abraham and who he is, and he is the one who received this promise in Genesis 12, 1 through 3. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and from your kindred and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." The Lord promised Abraham a place to live. "And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great." So he also promised Abram that he would bless him and turn him into a great nation on the face of the earth and make his name great. And so the story of Ruth really begins with this promise here. He says to Abram, "You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse him who dishonors you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed." And so we saw that those who cursed Abraham, those who dishonored him, like the nation of Moab, the Lord took their curses and rolled them back on themselves. And so Moab became a nation that was cursed under the plan of God and was under his wrath and forbidden to enter into anything that the Lord was going to do with Israel. But also in Abraham, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Abraham was going to become a source of blessing to every people, every tribe, every tongue. And this promise in Genesis 12, 1 through 3 is an important part of the story of Ruth in all of these senses. And we're going to see that this morning, that God had a plan. It was a plan that he really began when he created this world. His plan he began to implement at the fall of human beings. And the promise to Abraham is one of the foundational promises in all of Scripture that tells us what God's plan for the world is and how he's going to save it. And so what I want to show you this morning is that the book of Ruth is the key moment up to this point in the Old Testament of the outworking of God's plan. It takes Israel beyond the law of God, takes Israel and points Israel toward the nations and toward what the Lord is going to do with all the world's peoples. I want to show you that this morning. Let's look at the number of blessings that appear in the book of Ruth. Turn to Ruth chapter 4 and verse 13, which Austin read for us earlier in the service. Ruth 4:13. I want to survey with you all of the different blessings that the Lord gave in this one experience of these two widows. The first blessing is in verse 13. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. We've seen that there were these two widows, Ruth, the Moabite daughter-in-law of the Israelite woman Naomi. Both of them widows, bereft of their husbands, and really without a country. Those two ladies come back to Bethlehem, and they are poor, they have no resources, they have no husbands, they have no future. And in the case of Ruth, that curse on Moab is hanging over her, and we've seen the Lord reverse that. Ruth is invited into the fields to take part in the harvest by Boaz. And Boaz says, your character is the reason that I'm showing favor to you. You are not of Moab, you are of the Lord. You are faithful. You were faithful to Naomi, your mother-in-law, and you served her. You were a blessing to her. You supported her, and you even left your own country, and you changed from the gods of Moab to the God of Israel. You are under the Lord's wings. And so we saw that the Lord brought this Moabite woman into his nation and his people to participate in that harvest. But now there's this other action going on. Ruth has asked Boaz, will you redeem me? Will you marry me so that as a young widow I can extend the line of my father-in-law, Elimelech, and the family of my husband, my dead husband, Mahlon, and so that we can be supported and be secure and have a future in this country. Boaz, you are the kinsman redeemer. You are the one who can step in and provide this. Will you do it? And we saw that Boaz said, yes, I will do it. And we saw him kind of negotiate at the city gate and sideline the nearer kinsman and get him out of the picture, and so that he can step in and he can redeem Ruth and bring her into the nation, not just into the fields, but into the families, so that she has a place and a future. And now that comes to pass. She becomes his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord, Yahweh, gave her conception. Now, this is interesting, because this action is ascribed directly to the Lord himself. She had a husband for some years in Moab, Mahlon. Mahlon, who, together with his father, rejected Israel and rejected the land and the provision of the Lord and said, we would do better for ourselves among the enemies of God. We would do better in a cursed nation than we would in Israel. Now, she did not receive a son by that husband. And the direct implication of this is that the Lord withheld a child and imposed for a season, allowed that pain and that loss. And then that husband dies, and the father dies, and then the son dies, and she's a widow, and she's without that child, and it looks to Naomi, remember, bitter. This is not going to work out. God has dealt bitterly with me in my life. I want you to change my name, she said, from pleasant to bitter. We'll talk about that more in a moment. And so we go through this experience, and yet the Lord had a plan. There was always a future for Ruth. There was always a future for Naomi. And that future has finally been delivered. It's through Boaz and his work. It is to bring Ruth into the nation of Israel so that she is part of all that God is doing. And God engineers this. So you have this strange situation in the book of Ruth where all of this just kind of appears to be happening, kind of like it does for us. Life is happening to us. There don't seem to be reasons why things are happening. We're just going through one hard thing after another, and sometimes the hard things pile up as devastating. But Ruth is saying, behind all of this, the book of Ruth is saying, the Lord is operating. And he is operating in the story of Ruth. Ruth just happened, by the sheerest coincidence, when she went out to glean, to end up in the field belonging to Boaz. It just kind of shook out that way. Well, the book of Ruth is saying, no, it didn't. She was led to that field by the Lord. And there comes to be this growing awareness, even on Naomi's part, that the Lord is doing something here. He is active in this terrible, devastating experience that we are having. And she talks about the Lord's kindness to the living and to the dead in bringing Ruth to Boaz's field. So now the Lord has given Ruth conception, and what she could not do in Moab with Mahlon, she now does with Boaz in Israel. There is a future, and God transplanted her from one country to another to ensure that future, but that future was always there. Just an exhortation here. As we grieve, as we go through hard things, and as it appears that life is just happening to us and that God is remote behind a screen, he's not talking to us, he's not engaged, we don't see him, understand this. There are those seasons of life, and those are the seasons where faith is most important. And where faith, it's funny, our faith feels the weakest in those seasons. It feels like all we've got is doubt. All we have are questions. But in those seasons, our doubting questions directed to God, our expressions of devastation, our expressions of grief, all of those things are faith. And they are all directing us to look more to the Lord and to understand more what he is doing. And so the book of Ruth is displaying this for us as we look at the Lord's actions very much from the outside. Now we have a son. We have an heir. Elimelech, the rebel, has an heir. Mahlon, the rebel following in his father's footsteps, has an heir. The Lord is kind to the living and the dead. And so here is this son. And how does this relate to the promise to Abraham? The promise to Abraham was, those who bless you, I will bless. So Ruth is connected by marriage to this Israelite mother-in-law, and she is a blessing to her, even when they are both bereaved, and she would be entirely within her rights, Ruth would be, just to think about herself and her own future. She doesn't. She is faithful to Naomi and blesses this Israelite widow. And what the Lord is doing right here is saying, you, Ruth, blessed my daughter, I will bless you. This is his faithfulness to the promise to Abraham. And it is a reversal, in her case, of the curse against Moab. He's saying, you're not a Moabite anymore. You're my daughter. You have taken shelter under my wings. You're a new person. So there is that blessing. But there's another blessing in this passage, and that is to Naomi herself. Verse 14. So Ruth bears a son. Then the women of Bethlehem, these are the people to whom Naomi said back in chapter 1, I'm not pleasant anymore. I'm bitter. I'm not Naomi. Call me Mara. Those women come around Naomi again, and they say this, Blessed be the Lord, Yahweh, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. He led you to Boaz. He led Ruth to Boaz. And Boaz is a man who understands the heart of the law of God, the importance of stepping in and redeeming and providing and building safety, the importance of raising people up and recognizing their dignity. He gets it. And the Lord led you to him. He has provided you with a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. You always wonder, okay, whose name? Are they talking about the Lord's name? The Lord led you to Boaz? Or is she talking about the Redeemer's name? May the Redeemer's name, Boaz's name, be renowned in Israel. We're going to see in a moment, or in a few minutes, that there's actually another Redeemer in view here. So which is it? Whose name is going to be renowned in Israel? Who do they mean to include in this? Probably all of them. May the Lord's name be renowned. May it be known what the Lord does in Israel. May Boaz's name be renowned, and we are expecting another Redeemer too. So they say that. Look at verse 15. He, the Redeemer, Boaz, shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. So Boaz comes into the picture here, and certainly he is a redeemer to Ruth, and he is restoring her and bringing her into Israel. But Naomi is a central character here, this woman who was bereft of everything. And they're saying to her, Boaz has been provided to you so that he can restore your life. The lives lost can be returned to you, can be restored, raised up again, and so that in your age of vulnerability, when your dignity should be most respected and upheld, he will nourish your old age. He will feed you, uphold you, strengthen you in that period of your life. He's your Redeemer, and the Lord provided this. And here's the reason in verse 15. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is worth more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to a son. So what are they saying here? Boaz is going to be a restorer of your life and a nourisher of your old age, because now his new wife, your daughter-in-law, Ruth, who loves you, who has proven that she can provide more for you than 7 sons, she's more valuable to you than the 2 sons you lost, and more valuable to you if you added even 5 more. Go to the full number of sons and manhood in your house. This woman is more valuable to you than all of them might have been. And the Lord recognized that. Boaz recognized that. And he has given you this son, extending your life. Think of all of these blessings here um, that Naomi is receiving, and consider with me the power of this affirmation of Ruth. We've asked this question many times. Is Ruth going to be received in Bethlehem as a Moabite? Is she going to be treated well? Is she going to be honored? Or is she going to be rejected, shamed, treated violently? Is she going to be abused? And we saw that the answer to that question was no, but what you're seeing here is that it's not just Boaz. That Boaz has built something in Bethlehem as a community as a whole that has changed the city's attitude toward outsiders and has given them a sense there is value and dignity in people from every tribe and tongue. Can you think with me just how big that is? How massive it is to take 400 years of animosity and one man in one town and his fellow leaders and their wives, they turn it around and they see something new happen. They turn it around by applying God's law based on the character of Yahweh and the good that he builds into people. I want to put it to you that in our many challenges as a country with ethnic animosity and the doom of history hanging over us for the sins of our nation, and as we look at this, as we look at the fruit of this animosity, generation after generation, we've got a model here. The model is that individual people decide God's way is good. Let's do that. And they get together and they do it. And the Lord, because he loves this, he loves his law, and he loves it when his people take on his character and bring in other people to take on that character. He loves this. So when he sees this, he begins to bless it. Those who bless you, I will bless. And he begins to multiply that new thing of fidelity and love and dignity and justice. And we have a model here that takes us well beyond all of those ideologies, whether left or right, that would freeze our hostility in place and make us live there generation after generation. This is a model that says we must follow the Lord. It is our mission. And it is a mission founded on the recognition that one woman can make a decision that changes the course of a family and an entire community, and we'll see it gets even bigger than that. One. So there are blessings on Naomi. Verse 16, Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name. The women around Bethlehem name this child. They name him Obed. And they say, a son has been born to Naomi. This is Naomi's future. And we got to understand here in Israelite culture, sonship is not just something in your immediate family. It goes all the way back to the beginning. And so, yes, this is Naomi's grandson, technically, but in the biblical way of thinking about this is her son, her future. This is the Lord restoring her life. And this name, Obed, means servant, one who serves. And so the women name him that, and Obed goes on, and he is the father of Jesse, and that line goes forward. So we've got more blessings here with Naomi. I just want to underline here, if you're grieving today, if you're looking at a life of loss and wondering, where is the Lord? I don't see him speaking. I don't see him acting. All I see is life piling on. Understand that you have a Redeemer, and that Redeemer is active behind the scenes, off camera, behind the curtain. And that Lord is for you, not against you. And your confidence in him, even if it is a confidence of doubt and saying, I'm afraid and I'm grieving and I'm angry, bitterness has hit me, even that kind of life with the Lord is part of his plan. It is but for a season, and the Lord will redeem. For some of us, we're looking for a final redemption when Jesus comes again. But remember, that is his plan. And that plan, as far as God is concerned, is a finished plan. It is complete. He already sees the end from the beginning. So your restoration, though it is not clear to you right now, it is already finished in his hands. It is absolutely secure. So there is another point of blessing. We've seen blessings on Ruth, the Moabite, brought into Israel. And we've seen the blessings on Naomi, the widow, who was bitter and is now pleasant again. But there's even more. Judah. So I've got a picture up here of two people, Judah and Tamar. And we need to understand this story because it tells us why the genealogy at the end of this book is so important. And so we're looking here at verse 18. Now these are the generations of Perez. And we don't often read these portions of Scripture or teach on them because they're boring. They're the genealogies. And we basically say, well, skip that part. And I'm so grateful to Austin for reading it to us. This list of names of who fathered whom. And this is a marker here that this was an important iteration in the plan of God. These were the generations of this guy called Perez. And I said last week that there was this very strange blessing that the community of Bethlehem gives to Boaz when he settles this deal and he says he's going to redeem Ruth and Naomi. They say, may you be like Rachel and Leah and built up the house of Israel. And verse 12, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. May you be like that. And I will just tell you that this is one of the ugliest stories in the Bible. This is kind of like saying, may you be like your great-uncle Tex, who went to prison for running drugs in Chicago. I don't know. It's like he nearly ruined the family. I'm just trying to hit all of the stereotypical bases here. This is like that. How is this a blessing? Saying, be like Judah and Tamar, this is more like a curse. May you be disreputable and vile just like they were. What are they saying here? And this genealogy says these are the generations of Perez. So here's the story in brief. You can find this in Genesis 38. Judah, mafioso, fresh from selling his brother Joseph, remember him, into slavery. Having accomplished this, he goes off and in Genesis 38 marries a Canaanite woman, has 3 sons. And he chooses Canaanite wife for his eldest son, and this Canaanite wife's name is Tamar. Is wicked, and Genesis 38 says, the Lord put him to death. That's fairly chilling. How wicked do you have to be that the Lord puts you to death? Well, that's what happened. So Judah he's got his Canaanite wife, and he's chosen a Canaanite wife for his eldest son, but the Lord killed his eldest son. And now he's got a Canaanite widow on his hands. So he says, okay, I'll give you the second-born son, Onan, for your husband, and he will carry on the line for you. Onan basically takes Tamar sexually, but withholds a child from her. And so you can read the account yourself. We won't go into that. But basically the Lord looks at this and says, you're taking and you're not giving what you owe. You're a dead man. So he kills Onan too. 2 sons. First one is killed. Second one is killed, both for being wicked. Judah, looking on at all of this, looks at his son Shelah and says, well, I'm getting a little nervous. We're 2 down here. So Shelah, he's still underage. And he says, well, we'll wait for him to grow up, Tamar, and then remain a widow. Don't go anywhere. Then I'll give you Shelah. Why? Because Judah's in danger. His line could end right there. He's a man looking at no future. So he's got to preserve Shelah. So he holds him back, and he does not give Tamar what she is owed for her preservation as a person and for the continuation of her family. He withholds and withholds and withholds. Shelah grows up, and he doesn't give him to her. So Tamar, after years of this, says, I am never going to get what you owe me, Judah. So let's do this. Told you this was horrible. She covers her face, sits by the side of the road as a prostitute, and she waits there because she knows that Judah is coming up the road. Judah sees her sitting by the side of the road, and he wants her services. So the scene that you have here is Judah approaching Tamar, and what she's saying to him is, as her identity is disguised, yes, I will give you my services for a young goat, but I want a pledge that you're actually going to pay up. So I want your staff and your cord and your signet. It's like the equivalent of, can I hold on to your driver's license and your passport? And when you pay me, I'll give you those back. So he says, okay. And what you see here in this picture, it looks like he's stabbing her. He's actually not. He's handing over his staff and a signet ring. And so he's giving security for his payment. And so they have sex, and she disappears with his signet and cord and staff, his driver's license and passport. So Tamar shows up pregnant, and Judah, a mafioso that he is, says, we're going to take care of this. You were unfaithful to my family. You brought shame on my house. We're going to burn you. And she says, before you do that, I want to show you who the father of this child is. Can you identify this staff and this cord and this signet? This is the moment when Judah hits bottom in the book of Genesis. He is forced to confess what he did in public and to realize that he is now an incestuous father. He is humiliated in front of the entire community, and he confesses, Tamar is more righteous than I am, his words, because I did not give her my son Shelah. I did not give her what I owed her. And this starts a journey in Judah's life, a journey of repentance that goes all the way to the end of the book of Genesis. That's a story for another day, but there were two sons born to Tamar. The first one of these twins is Perez. Perez is half Canaanite, half Israelite, the product of an incestuous union. Now these are the generations of Perez. By the way, is this sounding familiar? You got sons in rebellion against the Lord, following in the footsteps of their rebellious father, and they die, and there's a widow, and no one's stepping up to redeem this widow. Is this all sounding familiar here? And there's an interracial element to this. Now, these are the generations of that son, Perez, the half Canaanite, half Israelite son of Judah. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz saw a Moabite widow and did not do what Judah did. He stepped in and said, I will be the redeemer for her. And he redeems her and fathers Obed, and he was the father, Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. The last word of the book of Ruth tells the story of the entire Bible in one word. In that story, God promised Abraham, I will bless those who bless you. Those who curse you, I will curse. I will make your name great, and I will make you a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. And so we have a story here of how Judah, a crime boss, brought a Canaanite into the line of Israel, another people under a curse, and fathered Perez. And he did this without realizing what he was doing. He was bringing another nation into the line of Israel. And then it happens again. Boaz marries a Moabite, and that Moabite blood also comes into the line of Judah. In other words, in the terms of ancient culture, the line of Judah is not a pure line. It's a mixed line. There are other nations in there, and what that means is that David, the king of Israel, is part Moabite. Now, if you take that and you plug that in to the ancient mindset, that is mind-blowing. That is scandalous. You can't do that. That means that the receiver, the recipient of another covenant of God, an eternal covenant by which his Son will reign eternally on his throne. That guy is partly from a cursed nation, Moab. God, what are you doing? Lord, how can you mix pure and impure like this? What are you up to here? Just this, that as the king of Israel, David is part Moabite, so is the King of Kings. His son Jesus has Canaanite blood in him, has Moabite blood in him, and that blood is coursing through the veins of the resurrected body of the King of the whole universe right now. God said he would make Abraham a blessing to every people, every tribe on the face of the earth, and his plan was to set about doing just that, even if it meant taking rebels who were rejecting God and his plan and determined to start their own thing, even if it meant taking their work, breaking it down, and refashioning it for his own purposes. God's going to finish his work. The Jesus who went to the cross was a Jewish man, but he was a Jewish man of mixed race, which means that it is his blood, when his blood was shed, it was shed for all nations, because they're all in there. So there's something very important for you to know this morning about the God of the book of Ruth. This God who we've been watching in this book. He's been operating this whole time. He's been doing all of this stuff, but he didn't say anything. He didn't appear to do anything. No angels showed up, no voices from heaven, no burning bush, no great miracles. It's all just kind of normal. You know what this means? Your life is not what it seems. Your life, your struggles, your challenges, none of these things are what they appear to be. What we call real life, normal life, it's a screen. And behind that screen is the reality of God's purposes for all human beings in all places at all times. God's purpose of redemption. He has a plan. We don't know what it is. We only know pieces of it. We only know parts of it. That plan is being completed. It is being fulfilled. So, if you're like me and you've had losses that go deep into your heart and you can't get them back, this means that for those of us who have these losses, God has a plan for our redemption. And that plan is complete right now. We're still in the middle of it. If you are in the place of Judah, where you're saying, I am a criminal. I have done things that cannot be forgiven. They cannot be taken back. There are things that I absolutely cannot undo. I would if I could, but it is done, and it is on my head. If that's you, then the God of the book of Ruth is saying to you, I am kind to you. I will rescue you. I will save you out of your sin even before you're done sinning. I will move you into the plan of my grace without you knowing what I am doing. But you will look back and you will say, God did good to me when I was doing evil. So if you are in Judah's place, then you are covered by this Redeemer, the Lord in the book of Ruth, and the King of Kings who sits on David's throne. If you're Ruth herself and you're saying, I'm an outsider to this whole thing, I can't get in because nothing in my past, nothing in my family, nothing in what I've been taught or the way I have lived leads to the Lord. I don't have a share in what you're talking about. The powerful message of the book of Ruth is that the Lord is following you, and He is taking you under His wings. And He will usher you into His people. And He will make you part of who He is, part of His character, part of His goodness, a display of His grace, and you will be a foreigner no more. Whatever that looks like to you, you will be a son or daughter of the King of Kings. That is the plan of God. In other words, the real Redeemer in the book of Ruth is not Boaz. The real Redeemer is the Lord. But we can be used the way Boaz was used.